Have you ever seen that show, Hoarders? It creeps me out. I mean, when I look at all the stuff that people just collect, and then the infestations that occur, the bugs, the rats. How crazy would it be if somebody was interviewed for that show and they said, look, I know I've got a problem, and so I've called the exterminator, and the exterminator is going to come clear out all the bugs and rats. If you were watching that show and you heard somebody say that, you'd be so frustrated. Like, no, that's not the issue. The issue isn't the infestation. The issue is all of the junk that you're hoarding that creates the conditions for the infestation to occur. The same is happening in our hearts and our lives. What we don't realize is that we've probably picked up a lot of baggage in regards to our relationship with God that's completely confusing and disorienting to our identity. When you look at the arc of the biblical story, you'll see that this idea of shame is absolutely central to understanding your human existence. And what happens in shame is you feel bad about who you are, rather than just feeling guilt, which is when you feel bad about what you've done. You go back to Genesis and you see that the height of human existence was recorded as a feeling, and that feeling was no shame. What did they have? Well, they were made in God's image, and being made in God's image meant multiple things, but part of it was they had an open and free relationship with God, which would have been the security of their identity. They were taking care of the garden, the clarity of their mission, and they had relationship with each other, Adam and Eve, the beautiful building of community. And all of that gets thrown off as they buy into this temptation that they're not like God already. And as they buy into this temptation, they fall from this place of a shame-free existence, and they run and they hide and they're afraid. And when you get the sense of the text, I kind of think about my kids. If they were to be upstairs in their room and get real quiet, my natural instinct as a parent would be to think something may be going on upstairs. And if I come bounding up and they hear me coming, if they feel like they've done something wrong, they might run and hide. If they've been doing some uncommissioned artwork on the walls, they may in shame feel like they have to run from me. And for a lot of us, we've experienced, whether it's in corrupt spiritual leadership or just jacked up home situations, when people come bounding up the stairs, they're coming to vent their anger, to let us know how upset they are. But when God comes to Adam and Eve in the garden, he just asks them, where are you? He could have appeared behind them. He knew where they were. He wanted them to admit it. And in admitting it, shame always turns to blame because Adam blames Eve. Let me ask you this. For Adam and Eve to run and hide in their shame, had God changed so that they thought they should run and hide from him? Or had their perception of God changed? Their perception of God changed. They had a false image of God. Now, what we see throughout the rest of the biblical story is God reaching into our broken state where we feel shame, we feel bad about who we are, and showing us a very lavish love to rescue our hearts. Whether it's the story of the prodigal son or the very act of the crucifixion, Jesus shamed the shame. He faced it, embraced it, endured that same feeling that Adam and Eve had in the garden. My God, why have you forsaken me? He endured that feeling abandoned by God, so that we don't ever have to suffocate under the shame. Now, what we looked at last time was this process the Father uses to build our lives: identity, mission, community. And what I want you to understand is you've been built, you've been triggered, you've been conditioned by your experiences to believe a lie about who God is and a lie about who you are. I recently started running again. I ran in high school, didn't really enjoy it, but I'm loving it now. Something changed for me. And one of the things that's been really fun is I run to this app. It's a zombie app. It simulates like you're running from zombies. It's a real head trip. And I listen to this playlist while I'm doing it. And about, I don't know, so many songs in, it's this certain song every time is when the zombies will chase me. And if you run at night, it is especially interesting. One night I was working at the house, the lights were on, I'm sitting at the kitchen table, everybody's asleep, and I'm listening to music through my headphones, and that song came on that comes on about the time when I'm running and the zombies are on the chase. Now, I am in a house at night, I'm fine, but when that song came on, I looked over my shoulder. I was almost afraid of what was behind me. Now, what's ridiculous is, number one, I'm inside. Number two, it's not real. But I had been triggered to be afraid. You've been triggered to be afraid about who God is and who you are. It's the basis of shame. Maybe you wonder at the core of who you are, where you feel shame. Are you worthy if you don't perform well? Maybe you wonder, and it may have never been consciously known to you, but it was subconsciously there driving you and operating underneath the surface. Are your needs a problem? Do you have a home? Do you have a place to belong? If people don't need you, will they love you? Are you safe, or will the earth fall out from underneath you? All of us are victims of the enemy's assault, and he's taken the hurt in our lives and spun a lie to us about who we are and who God is. And then we keep living in that lie. So it's time to take responsibility for our lives, to lean in and understand that our calling right now at this moment is not to try to clean up our lives or not to try to fix things. It's to be aware that there is a lie that we suffocate under. And God has given us his Holy Spirit. And in the fruits of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, self-control. He's given us our home and our identity in him. We're worthy even if we don't perform. We're safe in him. We're internally held even if externally we face challenging circumstances. We're loved. We have a place to tie into where we belong. Now, there are two kinds of Christian cultures in the world. Those that are obsessed with trying to have the mountaintop experience. We talked about this last time with Elijah. We've got to get to the fire falling down on Mount Carmel. And then there are Christians who understand that's fine and well for beautiful things to happen in your mission and in your relationships. But the core that we're called to live from is when we learn that God is the still, small voice. He wants us to know who he is and experience him in truth, that he comes to us in the garden with gentleness, like a loving father, not to get angry or not to get us, but to restore us. If I could compare two different scenarios to you. One, if I were to say, I have fellowship with my kids, I have relationship with my kids, and I describe the scenario this way. My wife has a timeline around the kitchen wall with all the events in my life. She has a book she made up for the kids they can turn to real fast and recite facts about my life. They even get candy if they do it super fast. Or scenario two, I come home, I wrestle with the kids before dinner, we clean up the kitchen together. While we're eating dinner, I ask them any sad or glad moments in their day. Tucking them in at night, I ask them how their heart is. Now, which of those two is relationship and fellowship? Obviously, it's the second one. They'll learn about me and facts about me in the second one, but they relate to me. Jesus wants to relate to us, and it starts with your identity. And the way that you begin that is you get aware of the hurt.